Welcome to Legerity's IFRS 17 webinar, Kickstart 2022, IFRS 17 Out of the Box. This webinar is being recorded, so please get in touch afterwards if you would like a copy of the recording or the slides, and do please share with any colleagues who are unable to attend today. We're using the GoToWebinar system today, which allows you to ask questions on the right-hand side, and we'll do our best to answer any questions towards the end of the webinar. So now, allow me to hand over to Legerity CEO, Jeremy Wood.
Well, thank you, Mike, and welcome to everyone for our start of our webinar series for 2022. I hope you had a good festive break and stayed safe, and have started this year with a major focus on delivering IFRS 17. So in the webinar today, we've got quite a lot to cover. We're going to be covering both sort of functional items, data items, reporting, and actually showing you a software demonstration. And we'll start off, as we normally do, with a little bit of an introduction to us at Legerity, in case you haven't come across us before, and just generally have a look at where IFRS 17 is in the market in terms of progress of the insurers, in terms of what are we seeing in the market at the moment, and what are the sort of main tasks for 2022. So we've got a lot to pack in, and hopefully you'll find that of interest. As Mike said, we will leave some time at the end for question and answers. So if you do want to pose any questions as we go through, then you can do that via the GoToWebinar portal, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. Good. So let's make a start. So presenting today alongside myself is Mark Miller. Mark's our IFRS Global Lead, and like myself has been working very hard, coming up for the 5th year now in IFRS 17 from when the standard first came out, or the guidelines were finalized in 2017. So it's been very much of our working lives over the last 5 years. It's taken us pretty much everywhere around the world. It really is a global standard, and obviously bringing a lot of things together during 2022 with a target date of going live in and going full standard in 2023. We focus very much on accounting change at Legerity, and in our IFRS 17 solutions, we've been well recognized in the market. We are current award winners from Insurance ERM. We were the Solution of the Year for 2021, and hopefully we will be for 2022 as well. And also we're recognized as one of the category leaders from industry analyst chartists in the IFRS 17 space. So I think we got good credentials, and hopefully that will come through as we go through the presentation today. So at Legerity, we help our clients by providing a IFRS 17 solution. It's true to say in the early days, the earlier adopters, you know, it was really configuring to their specific requirements. But over the last 2 years, all of that hard work that we put in right at the start has paid dividends for firms who are coming to the market later. And we have a very much pre-configured solution. So when Mark goes through the demonstration today, he will be showing you and illustrating sort of our out-of-the-box configuration. And I think that's particularly relevant for firms that are just coming to the market and starting IFRS 17 in terms of the implementation at the early stages of 2022. Obviously, timelines are fairly tight, and if we can give you a fast start using our out-of-the-box configurations, which have been well proven across a whole number of different insurers across the world, then that makes the task of implementing IFRS 17 quicker and at lower risk. IFRS 17 is actually just one of a number of things that we do. Anything complex from an accounting perspective or new standards is how we help our clients. Very modern technology, all cloud-based. We'll talk about that, And as you'll see in the demonstration, all the systems up and running already, ready provisioned, and so sort of onboarding of systems is a lot more straightforward than traditional on-premise. And then we have teams of people to help. And again, throughout the company, we have a lot of experience in IFRS 17. As I said, it's a global standard, and our clients range right the way from the US through to New Zealand and pretty much everywhere in between. And we're active in about 35 countries around the world. So let's have a quick look at where the market is. So this is a slide we started out in May 2017 when the guidelines were first published, and Mark and his team of analysts sort of looked at the standards. It was as you will all know, it's a very big set of standards, and those standards have continued to evolve right the way through to 2021. And we were able to operationalize those in terms of configuring them into the FastPost solution. So that was the first start. And then over time, obviously working with some of the more of the early adopters and through implementation. And in the perfect world, firms would now be in dry runs and running their comparatives. And indeed, many of our clients, as we'll tell you about in a moment, are doing that. But also, I think it's true to say that IFRS 17 has certainly taken longer to implement than maybe first thought, and there's been a lot of challenges along the way. But I think the key really is the focus for most geographies is that in 2022, we need to get to a position where we are putting in opening balances and running the comparatives ready to go completely live by 2023 as the standard requires. If we look at the industry generally, the big four, obviously, in terms of the big four audit and advisory firms, cover the market pretty comprehensively. And this was actually the latest survey that came out in December of 2021, so within the last 5 or 6 weeks. It was from KPMG, and they studied, I think it was about 25 insurers, global, all different types of insurers, and it really sort of set the scene in terms of where they think the market is in terms of the representation of these 25 insurers. And I think there's probably 2 or 3 key messages that came from this. If you look from sort of left to right on this slide, it goes through the sort of life cycle of implementation from setup and then implementation and then dry runs and then ultimately optimization, looking at your target operating model and readiness to go live. And if you look at the sort of the themes that have come through from this, if you look at the numbers and the stats, over 70% of the insurers who responded in the survey are still within the first 2 sort of blocks of activity from the left-hand side. So over 70% have not completed their testing. So for those of you who are just coming to the market now and implementing IFRS 17 for the first time, you may feel that you're late to the market, but 1, there is still time, and 2, you're not alone. I think the other things that came out of this survey was that when you do get into the configuration and testing phase, that takes a lot longer than many anticipated, and that's where sort of out-of-the-box pre-configured solutions can be of major benefit. And I think generally in the industry, and we saw this because we were involved from pretty much from day one, the early adopters tended to be the life firms. I think those firms felt that IFRS 17 with the GMM model and VFA was going to impact them more than just on the PAA side for P&C insurers. So life insurers were definitely probably at the front of the pack, albeit that may have more complexity in their programs. But P&C insurers and many who are just starting now and reinsurers are tending to, be in the earlier phases. So I think the takeaways from there is, there's still a lot of work to do during 2022. And if you are at the earlier stages, then I guess two things: one, you're not alone, and two, the industry and vendors like Legerity have a lot of experience to help you get to you know, the final stages over 2022. When we sort of look at some of the options for IFRS 17, particularly those that are starting out, you know, I guess there's three main type of options to address this particular standard. We are seeing some of the later firms, or firms just coming to market now, looking at some of the spreadsheet-based systems that some of the big four are providing. So these, you know, can look attractive because, one, they're low cost and everyone uses spreadsheets, but ultimately IFRS 17 is a complex standard. It relates to the profit of your business, and it needs to be a robust system. So even though spreadsheets can seem, you know, a route that is worth looking at for firms coming to the market now, spreadsheet-based systems, no matter how they're packaged, you know, have inherent issues around control, audit, and as we all know, 95% of spreadsheets have some form of error. Part of that will be material errors as well. Looking at an internal build, that can be also a challenge, and I don't think we would recommend that at this stage. I think firms right at the beginning of the market, you know, did look at doing internal builds. Some of those have been challenging. We've helped firms sort of with plan Bs that where internal build has not gone right. I think really the option now, and there are solutions out there that are mature enough for IFRS 17 that offer, you know, off the shelf, out of the box, and certainly with our Legerity FastPost Express, which we'll talk about in a moment, definitely is a great option for that. I think the other thing as well is the delivery model is now mature enough. We've done enough of these implementations that we can provide a fully managed service, even down to a bureau type service. So we've partnered with a number of big four firms and some local regional specialist accounting and actuarial firms, where if you really just want the numbers and you can provide us with the data, then we can do all of the number crunching and fully support you in that. And that, I think, is an offer and a solution that is proving very very interesting to particularly some of the smaller and medium-sized firms. And that's built on FastPost Express. As we talked about, it's a pre-configured solution. Comes in various different flavors, from a simple implementation for a PNC insurer just using the PAA model with the gold, with the bronze level, through to GMM and VFA in the silver and the gold versions as well. So Mark will be demonstrating that in a moment. So final couple of slides, then we're going to hand over to Mark. You know, we've done implementations now in 35 countries. These are some of the sort of a few sort of snippets in terms of some interesting projects, and to show you, you know, we can deliver quickly based on this sort of pre-configured route. We had a Middle East insurer who started relatively late, PNC insurer, property motor engineering, and we started the program there with one of the big fours, actually with EY, and we were quite proud, and the insurer is very proud because they were the first insurers to submit their dry runs to the local regulator. So in some jurisdictions, the regulators are pretty tough on this, pretty strict, that they need to meet certain deadlines. In the Middle East, this was exactly the case, and we delivered for this insurer within 12 weeks. We had a plan B for a US insurer. This was a complex life business, GMM, modified GMM and VFA, and their in-house build really hadn't gone to plan. So they had some very specific dates they had to deliver for the group for transition reporting. They came to us, and within 6 weeks we were able to take their data, put it through the system and deliver their transition report. So that was a plan B that will now further move into sort of full production. And then a interesting case study here, a sort of European life and general insurer. This was a pretty comprehensive gold level implementation, so there was quite a lot of customization, and also included a full new architecture for finance systems around a new data lake. So that was a good example of a very comprehensive program, and that's now effectively live. They've got opening balances and comparatives loaded, and we delivered that in 9 months. So against the industry norm and the industry standards, that was pretty rapid delivery. Good. So some interesting things that we were doing over the course of the last year. So we always like you to participate as well. So on the theme of what approach are you taking or you're intending to take for IFRS 17, for those that haven't actually started, I'm going to launch the poll now. So if you could pick up your mice and give us a view of what you're intending to do. Using your spreadsheet type approach, in-house, vendor solution, or yet to choose. Those are the sort of options, and let's have a look on where the results actually come out at. Okay, well those are interesting. So 50% around vendor solutions, so those projects are obviously in flight. As we said, in-house, I don't think, unless you're a really early stage firm, early adopter, that's probably not the route to look. There's mature enough systems. 18% on spreadsheets. So as I say, they do have their attractions, but we think for sustainability and longer term, maybe more of a robust enterprise type solution would be the ideal. But at spreadsheets there at 18%, and around 27% still to choose, so earlier stage. And I think you'll find the next part of the presentation very interesting, from Mark telling you some of the things that are possible using FastPost Express. Good. Well, thank you very much for participating in that. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now and just pass over to Mark. So Mark, if you're online.
Yeah, hi Jeremy, hi everyone.
So Mark, you should be presenter now.
Yeah, so hopefully you can see my screen.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, so I'll take you through a few slides and then we'll go into a bit of the software itself. So yeah, first thing is talk about our pre-configuration. So we spent quite a bit of time on this, and what we did was we started from the reporting side. So we looked very carefully at the disclosures, and we actually built out a series of templates for each of the main reconciliations and formats that you need to deliver, and I'll show you these. And then in our application, that can be supported with BI. We've got user screens, you can extract data, and then ultimately, of course, you've got your extract into the general ledger for posting to your record of account. So that was all pre-set up in the application, supported with what we call our accounting rules, and this is where we identify the accounting events, because IFRS 17 is a accounting standard, so we need to produce debits and credits at the end of the day, and we have all these defined in the product. And importantly, in IFRS 17, these are quite complex, so you're often involved in sort of dynamic situations, so different posting patterns under different circumstances, and also the choreography of the accounting rules, this one has to happen before the other, etc., is quite complex. All of that's set up in the product. And then each of the accounting rules is then supported by calculation. So if we consider something like releasing CSM for coverage, that kind of calculation is pre-set up in the product. So once we'd looked at all that, we could define the data requirements. And when we looked at the data, what we wanted to do was make sure that we made that integration as simple as possible, because in all these kind of projects, that's often the hardest area. So we designed a set of tables, and you can see these illustrated on the screen here. And we made sure that the tables relate to the type of data and the sources of data. So we have some tables around policy and the portfolios and the grouping. So we have some cash flow tables for both actuarial and actual cash flows. We have some drivers for things like coverage units or premium earning patterns. And then we have some tables to reflect all the reference tables and things like FX rates and discount rates. So the important thing is these tables are easy to populate because the transformation is minimized, and also the number of tables that you have to work with is also not that many, as you can see on the screen there. And that makes the integration effort much easier and faster. And we can do that because we have this tool called Data Manager. So our Data Manager effectively reads the data from the API tables, and at the same time can perform validation. So we have a lot of pre-configured validation rules. There's a lot of transformation of that data, filtering it, and importantly, enriching it with information that's sitting in the subledger and reference tables. And this packages up the data to feed into the accounting rules. So all of that logic is embedded in FastPost, which is why it's much easier to integrate with our tool, and that complexity of how to organize the data to deliver that accounting view is handled by us. So although everything is pre-configured for IFRS 17, there's a little bit more to do than that, and we have a lot of flexibility that we can adapt our product specifically for your individual circumstances. So for example, we have multi-ledger systems, so you'll need a main ledger for your results, but we can also configure alternate ledgers for things like scenarios or forecasting or running off balances. We're multi-entity, so if you're a group, we can set up all the individual branches or companies, including hierarchies. Some of our clients, we support them with some of their consolidation processes. The calendar is, again, very flexible, so some clients report externally just quarterly, so they just want quarterly periods in the ledger, but if you would prefer monthly or even daily, weekly, all of that is possible and definable by yourselves. In terms of the balance types, we're primarily focused with actuals, and that's what you need to comply. But you can also think about loading in budget and forecast data into the ledger to help with your management information reporting. And then, of course, we're a fully enabled multi-currency platform, so we have all the currencies and features around currencies that you'd expect. Last thing to say on this is just the way that we deliver detail in FastPost is what we call something we use called segments. So segments are like dimensions. So these are the ways that you can slice and dice the data. And we've used about 9 for IFRS 17 specific purposes. So things like measurement model, profitability cohort, time cohort, those kind of segments that you need for your disclosures. So 9 we use for that, and we have 20 in the system, so you have 11 that you could potentially use for any purpose you wish. And it would be very rare to use all 11, but some of our clients are taking advantage of this and, say, cutting their data by product, customer, or region, as you can see there. And again, that helps with your management information, but also control and reconciliation purposes as well. So that's the slide part of my presentation. So I'm just going to jump to the software. So this is FastPost Express login page. This is hosted on AWS cloud. So the advantage of being a cloud is that we can, when we start the project, we can immediately install a version of Legerity for yourselves, load up all of our standard configuration, and that means you get visibility of what you're working towards very early on. And honestly, that's a really helpful benefit in these kind of projects, because you can communicate what you're doing to stakeholders, but also you can align the project team around what we're trying to do. So I'll just log in as an administrator. We have full user access controls, and all the segregation of duties would be set up as part of the project, and we would do all that for you and align with your control framework. So when you log in, you get a whole series of screens. So what we've got here is a demo data set. I'm going to go to this policy group screen, and what we can see is a number of different groups. So these are the units of account in IFRS 17, and you can see we've got a number of portfolios here, segmented into different groups, some profitable, some onerous, different transition methods. And then we're measuring these under VFA, PAA, GMM, and variations for ceded reinsurance. So this is a dummy data set, but illustrative of the fact that our solution is fully configured and complete for all aspects of IFRS 17. So again, as I said, we would configure and set up the system for you, and that includes all the reference information, and all of the key reference information have screens that users can manage that going forward if they wish to. So for example, if I were to pick something like the chart of accounts, users can come visualize the chart of accounts here and potentially, edit that information under, of course, full audit control, and all changes are tracked. So we set the system up, but we give you visibility of all of the tables in the system, and if you choose, you can manage those going forward. So again, in terms of the accounting, we set the accounting up and we work on these accounting rule templates. These are where we define the logical rules for the debits and the credits, and if there is additional complexity within those rules, then that's again where we set all that up. So from our library of events, not everybody's the same. We have a whole series of accounting events, and we set up the events that you need for your business, for your products. So I'll pick an example. Say here we've got a change risk adjustment, so handling changes in assumptions. And if I search that up, you can see we've got a number of lines here, and actually we've got different variations of the accounting rule depending on the measurement model. So the posting patterns can vary depending on the measurement model. So if I was to say search for the GMM version, so we can just look at the GMM version, and effectively each line represents a debit or a credit for this particular accounting rule. So changes in assumptions, we would typically want to post to risk adjustment or CSM. That's the basic rule. But of course, if a contract is onerous, then we might need to post to the loss component. So embedded in the rule are logical statements that are easy to understand. We call it Legerity expression language. It's nothing more than the kind of thing you would put in an Excel formula. But here we can see, we have that ability to post in different accounts, i.e. CSM, loss component, depending if it's onerous. We also have variations in the accounting rules here for ceded reinsurance where the posting pattern is different. So all of that's set up, but of course very transparent and visible to the user how it's all working. So I've actually run the data today. We have dashboards, we have logs, we have workflow. So I'm not going to go into that today, but we try and set up automated processes for our clients. But if you want to run workflow specific tasks, then all of that is available in the application. So let's have a look at the results. So I can go to the subledger. We have a screen we call balance inquiry screen. This is where we look at all of the selectors, so we can look at different information. So as I mentioned, we're multi-ledger, multi-entity. So I'll select one entity. We're doing IFRS 17 today, but of course, FastPost is a platform that supports all kinds of use cases. So, comparison to IFRS 4, some insurers doing IFRS 9, or, maybe if you're US, you want to do US GAAP. So, it's not just about IFRS 17, but obviously I think for most, that will be the focus to start with. As I said, we can do actuals, budget, forecasts, and then we have all the currencies. So this calendar is based on a quarterly, but as I said, these periods could be assigned to, say, month if you choose. And if we run that, we get a trial balance. So for this entity under IFRS 17, we've got all of our accounts. This is GBP, and we can see the balances and movements over the selected period. So throughout the application, we have reporting, so you can extract, build a report based on your selections. In this case, we get a balance report. But of course, one of the key reporting goals of IFRS 17 is disclosures. So if we think about the disclosures, they're quite formal reports. They need a lot of formatting, and you might want to put logos on and things like that. So actually, the delivery mechanism, one important delivery mechanism could be Excel. So we've actually built an Excel tool. It's not doing any calculations. We have a tab here where you select your entity, your period, what groups. And then we've built out some templates that look at what we call the reporting data store in Legerity. We have a script. You click the button and it pulls back the relevant data into the template directly from Legerity. And we have examples of all of the disclosure formats that you will need, all the different reconciliations under all the different measurement models, and these are available to you as part of the project. Yeah, and you can just click the button and it pulls back the data. So if we say here, this reconciliation, we've got our risk adjustment column here. We can see our balance 13.6 million. We can go to our ledger. We can see our risk adjustment in our trial balance here, 13.6. And we can actually drill into that. So let's select our risk adjustment account. Here it's 13.6. But then we can use these segments to drill further into the information. That's where the power of those segments come in. So you just turn on a segment and it immediately splits the balance and the movements across those segments. And you can do different combinations. You can filter different groups. So if we say want to do a reconciliation and have a look at the different movements, we call that event. And then here we've got, the movements in the risk adjustment for new business, changes in risk and release risk. And of course, again, all of this information we can trace back to the disclosures. So, new business, that's the effect of new contracts. And I can see here, contracts initially recognized in the period 13.8. So everything that sits in the disclosures is directly traceable back to the subledger, and you can build reports around that, as I showed you. But we can also drill further. So if I turn that off and I just click through the movement, what happens then is we go through to another ledger screen called Journal Inquiry. So very similar looking, all these selectors, it's been pre-populated. We have some additional features around operational accounting, journal status, posting type, things like that. But here we get what we call a transaction listing. So these are all of the individual transactions supporting that particular movement. And again, we have all our segments. So if we want to build up a query with more information, I might want to know, for example, which group each transaction relates to. I turn that filter on, and then again, each of the transactions is coded for group. If I want to report that, again, click that. This time, rather than a balance report, we get a journal line report, so you can report that information. But also we can offer further drill down. So if I was to pick an individual transaction, so I'll put this one here, then it takes me back to the screen we call policy group screen. So at the start, when I showed you the list of groups, if I'd come through from that screen, this is where I would arrive at. And we can see this is a DPF group. It's actually onerous, and it's measured under the VFA measurement model. And what we get here is a list of events. So all the events that have been processed for this particular group. But because we came through from the transaction, the individual event ID is highlighted here, and we have the specific event that supported that transaction. But here we can see the full journal posting pattern, and we can see, because this group is onerous, this change risk adjustment event is posting to the loss component, not the CSM. So that logical statement is working. And then on the right here, we have all of the details that support the underlying transaction. So we have references that allow you to trace the data from the API tables. We have measurement model, currency, date, then all those segments that give us that rich detail in the subledger. So, and then we also have something called JSON attribution, which means that you can add data to the API tables, and that information will automatically flow into the system. So for example, here we have a source event code that we've added in, and that data is then flowed through into the system, and we don't need to be updating the data model or anything difficult like that. It just all happens automatically. So typically that's useful for things like this, or modeling assumptions, or approver, or particular system reference. Anything extra you want to add to support the transaction or your analysis is very easy to bring in and add. The calculation, a little bit complex, this one, the way it's looking at the balance in the system, comparing it with the data and working out the delta and posting that. All of our rules work a little bit differently, so we load in documentation that we agree and discuss with you as part of the implementation for each one of the events, so it's clear and transparent to users, what the event is, what it does, what tables are used, how the calculation works, and a bit about the accounting as well. So it's not a black box, and although we obviously go to great lengths to explain and discuss how the system is set up as part of the project, ongoing users get access to all of that in the system, so it's very clear how it's all working. So what we're trying to show you there is how you can, the system is already set up to deal with all aspects of IFRS 17. You can look at your data from a high level, from your disclosures, from say an entity level, and you can drill down into the ledger into more detail across the segments. You can identify the specific transactions. At any stage you can report that in the system, but you can also drill back through right to the underlying transactions and trace that through back to the data sitting in the API. And of course, that works the other way around, because you can trace data from the API all the way back through to the balances sitting in the ledger. So that's the heart of it. And of course, compliance is the main goal for most companies at this stage in IFRS 17. But I think it's important to think about beyond that and how you engage with management. So, with a tool like Legerity, you have what we call our reporting data store optimized for displaying the data. We have all the views populated. So if you have a BI tool like here, we have Microsoft BI, you can drag and drop those segments into these report formats and build up a whole suite of interactive dashboards for different stakeholders, members of the finance team, CFO, controller, and you can do all sorts of comparisons, across balances, across periods. And we're not just restricted to the data in the subledger. You can also, say here, analyze data sitting in the API or any of the reference information using these kind of tools as well. So we really are a complete package, and you can set up everything you need, not just to comply, but also to understand and manage the information going forward. And with that, I think I'll stop and hand back to Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Mark. Very comprehensive tour through the system there in a short period of time. Let me just share my screen again. So get the right monitor. Yeah. So hopefully, can you see my screen there, Mark?
Yep, all clear.
Very good. Well, thanks, Mark, for that. So just in the final 5 or 10 minutes, we'll just touch a little bit on delivery. So you've seen a lot there in the solution and what it can do. As I mentioned, we've been implementing now 35 countries, more projects than that over the last 4 or 5 years. And the methodology that we have developed to help clients implement quickly, cost effectively, low risk is packaged in our IFRS 17 delivery model. We have a sort of a fast start 90-day plan and methodology where we go through a series of workshops to do the initial discovery, map and understand your requirements, which we can then map through to the out-of-the-box designs, any level of customization that you need for your specific implementation will be picked up at that stage. We then go through a design and high-level design, detailed design phase in step 2, and ultimately deploy. And as you've seen, all cases vary slightly, but as you've seen from the slide that we presented at the beginning of the presentation in the case studies, some of these programs have been delivered very, very quickly. So again, for those of you coming to IFRS 17 now in terms of your implementation, this is a well-trodden path. And if you use solutions like FastPost Express and our methodology to deliver, then you stand the best chance of delivering in a timely and cost-effective manner. So I'd be very pleased to take you through that and introduce you to our delivery team. Good. Well, just before we finish, we've had some questions come through, so thank you for those questions. The first one from Mohit was around manual adjustments, Mark. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. Obviously, in a perfect world, you never have to make any adjustments, but practically, can we do manual adjustments in the system?
Yeah, and I think inevitably, ideally you'd want a fully data-driven automated solution, but with timing of the month end, then it's often the case that you might do manual adjustments, and we have full capability in the system to process manual adjustments. So we have screens where you can, teams can directly enter in adjustments, and that's very useful for sort of unexpected last-minute adjustments. But we also have templates that you can use. So it might well be that as part of your month end you have a regular item that doesn't quite fit the timetable at the initial phase, and so you can set up predefined templates for posting such adjustments that can then reverse out in the next period when you have the required data. So yes, we have all of the tools that you need around manual adjustment, and with all the audit and control that you'd expect around that.
Okay, good, thank you for that. And then following up on your on templates, actually, they're standard templates based on all of the models, and then the sort of the transition approaches. Does that come as part of the configuration? I guess the question is, yeah.
Yeah, we have all of the templates on disclosures and on the, for the API data ingestion around all of the different measurement models, and certainly on transition, we don't have specific templates around transition, but we have all of the tools you need to manage your transition under all the different fair value, modified retrospective and full retrospective approaches. And going a little bit beyond that, this is maybe going to implementation a bit, we can also potentially vary some of the ways that we process data on transition as well to simplify that. So for example, you may not want the same kind of cohort structure or things like that. So we're quite flexible on transition as well.
Good. Couple more questions. Come on. Do your clients use a solution for more than just IFRS 17?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at this stage, obviously IFRS 17 compliance should be the goal. But when I first started working at Legerity, we worked on IFRS 15 with the telco space. So, and some insurers do have IFRS 15 as part of their business. We're working a lot on IFRS 9 because 9 and 17 come along at the same time. And when we're looking at insurers across the globe, many insurers would want to say keep a view of IFRS 4 to compare with IFRS 17, but when you're also reporting in jurisdictions that you might have a head office in IFRS territory, but you're not in IFRS territory. So for example, US GAAP. So we work with clients so they can configure two views of the data, say under US GAAP and IFRS 17. So yeah, there's a lot of use cases that go beyond just compliance with IFRS 17, and we do have clients doing that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. So I guess the final one, Mark, was around. There's a couple more. Any sort of the last, some of those changes that came through last minute, some of the complexities that the market, I think, generally has either not addressed yet or is going to find very challenging. So things like foreign exchange and loss recovery components. These are very specific items. Any sort of observations or views on that?
Yeah, so it was the case that the standard was released, and then there's a lot of discussion around it, and then ultimately there were quite a few modifications. So we obviously kept abreast of that throughout the period. And for example, reinsurance loss recovery component you mentioned, that was a particularly complex one, and where there are a lot of discussion, a lot of changes. But actually, we've implemented a full solution around RLRC, as we call it, across all the measurement models. So our product is complete and tested and ready to go for that particular item. And in fact, all of the IFRS 17 aspects are fully configured in our solution, and that includes FX. So FX wasn't really changed in the final solution, but a lot of people put it to one side. It's just an extra complication. It's almost like an extra dimension, but that's a little bit dangerous, because when you suddenly start to look at it, it can have quite an impact on how you set the system up. So we were very careful to ensure that FX was incorporated fully in our solution right from as we were configuring it.
Good. And then just one final question before we wrap up. That was around costs, and this is a good one. So this is a smaller insurer in sort of Mediterranean location who's just posed the question about sort of scalability and cost. And the way that the model works, it's a really useful and neat way of cloud technology such as FastPost Express that allows us to do. So we have a scalable pricing model. So you get all those capabilities, but the pricing is really based on the size of the portfolio that you have and the sort of the level of complexity you're trying to implement. So we talked about the bronze, silver, gold. So that's sort of the level of complexity. Then the other measure is what is the size of your portfolio. And so by applying those two type of measures, we can come up with the right costing model. So it's a scalable costing model. And the beauty of that, as I say, is that for the smaller insurers, it gives you access to a system, an enterprise class system like FastPost, as opposed to, from a budget perspective, only being able to look at sort of a spreadsheet-based solution, which I think longer term, and bearing in mind I've been in the IT industry now for 36 years, I question the sustainability and the longer term viability of spreadsheet-based solutions for core revenue and profit based processing. So we got the right pricing for your size of organization, and then when we come to the implementation, again, the model now is well enough developed that we're very specific on what the implementation costs would be. And again, we can do that directly or in conjunction with global or regional partners as well. So, we'll follow up with that specific question because I think you gave us some examples there. So thank you for that, and we'll come back to you directly on that. Good. Well, we're just coming to the final couple of minutes. So thank you. There were a lot more questions as well. Everyone's being very good on posting questions. First webinar of the year, and we will come back to you specifically if we haven't answered your question already on that. So we'll come back to you individually. So you'll be hearing from us. If you do want to follow up with any individual meetings, we run a Meet the Expert. So this is your opportunity to have a one-to-one with Mark and some of his colleagues and the delivery team. So again, just come through to us at info@legerityfinancials.com and we'll set up a one-to-one session. There's no cost for that. It's just part of our sort of engagement model. There's a whole set of assets and collateral and information, videos and what have you on IFRS 17 on our website. And then just one final thing, as Mark mentioned, IFRS 17 isn't the only thing we do. We do other accounting standards. And one that we will be working with more this year, we did our first webinar at the end of last year, was the use of FastPost for looking at sustainability. So ESG and sustainability is a large topic. We think finance has a role in that, and particularly around accounting and control of ESG reporting. So you will be seeing more things from us on the whole topic of ESG. That doesn't mean that we lose focus on IFRS 17, but ultimately FastPost supports multiple different accounting standards, and whether it's carbon accounting or IFRS 17, we have the flexibility to do it. So there are other projects that we'll be doing with our clients post IFRS 17. Good. Well, thank you very much. That was a great set of questions coming through. Shows the importance of 2022 for getting over the line with IFRS 17. It's been a long journey, but the end is in sight. And for those who are just starting out, we'll be very, very pleased to discuss how we can best help, or even those that are maybe struggling with in-house built systems or projects that aren't quite going to plan, we're always more than happy to give you our views and give you some practical suggestions. So please contact us at info@legerityfinancials.com if you have any specific follow-ups or you'd like a copy of the slides. We will be continuing to run IFRS 17 webinars. I think we're up to nearly 40 webinars we've run over the last 4 years, and we get people do see value in them, and we get good feedback. So as long as that continues, we'll continue to run these webinars. But thank you for now. We'll finish up and look forward to speaking with you in the future. Thanks very much.